briefcase. Is that a joke?
We require a certain standard.
Please leave the premises immediately.
Arrived on his first day as an intern wearing a simple suit that looked years old. Most employees barely noticed him, except one ambitious executive who made sure everyone did. In front of an entire conference room, she questioned why a middle-aged single father had been hired as an intern at all, mocked his worn-out briefcase, and ordered him to leave before he embarrassed the department. No one defended him. Michael quietly picked up his files and walked away without saying a word. But what nobody in that room knew was that he wasn't there to impress anyone. He was there because of a secret decision made months earlier by the company's aging founder. Before this week was over, hidden family ties, buried corporate secrets, and one shocking announcement would completely change the balance of power, leaving the very people who laughed at him wondering if they had just destroyed their own careers. Michael Carter had spent most of his life proving that hard work mattered more than titles. At 42 years old, he was raising his 10-year-old daughter, Emma, on his own after losing his wife 5 years earlier to cancer. Every morning before sunrise, he made Emma breakfast, packed her lunch, and walked her to the school bus before heading into the city. To anyone watching, Michael looked like an ordinary father trying to rebuild his life. His dark blue suit had clearly been worn for years, his leather briefcase showed signs of age, and he drove an old sedan that blended into every parking lot. Nobody would have guessed that money had never been his problem. The truth was far more complicated. Michael had chosen this simple life because he believed people revealed their true character when they thought no one important was watching. That belief was exactly why he accepted the most unusual job offer of his life, not as an executive, not as a director, but as an intern. The company was Lawson Global Holdings, one of the largest family-owned businesses in the country, employing thousands of people across the United States and the United Kingdom. Most people would have considered it ridiculous for a man in his 40s with years of business knowledge to start as an intern. Even Michael's closest friends thought he had lost his mind. They couldn't understand why someone with his experience would willingly sit beside recent college graduates, take orders from managers half his age, and earn a small intern's salary. Michael simply smiled whenever they asked. There was a promise he intended to keep, and until the right moment arrived, no one could know the real reason he had walked through those doors. As Michael entered the company's headquarters on his first morning, the massive glass building buzzed with energy. New employees gathered in the lobby, chatting excitedly as they waited for orientation to begin. Most of the interns looked barely 22, dressed in brand new suits, carrying expensive laptops and coffee cups with the company's logo. Michael quietly stood near the back of the group, holding his old leather briefcase. A few people noticed him immediately. Some exchanged puzzled glances, wondering if he was someone's father waiting for an interview. Others assumed he had come to repair something in the building. Nobody imagined he was standing there for the exact same reason they were. Inside the orientation room, whispers began spreading across the rows of seats. "Is he really an intern?" one young employee quietly asked. Another laughed and replied, "Maybe he got lost looking for human resources." Michael heard every word, but his expression never changed. Years of life had taught him that people often judged what they didn't understand. Instead of reacting, he opened a notebook and patiently waited for the presentation to begin. Just as the room settled into silence, the conference doors swung open. In walked Sophia Bennett, the company's rising operations director. She was known throughout the building for demanding perfection and caring deeply about appearances. Her confidence filled the room before she even spoke. As she looked over the new interns, her eyes stopped on Michael. She frowned for a moment, then slowly walked toward him. The room became so quiet that every footstep echoed across the polished floor. Sophia glanced at his worn briefcase, then back at his face before asking a question that made every person in the room hold their breath. "Excuse me," she said with a cold smile, "are you sure you're in the right room?" The silence that filled the orientation room after Sophia Bennett's question was almost uncomfortable. Every pair of eyes turned toward Michael, waiting to see how he would respond. He slowly stood, offered a polite smile, and simply said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." His calm answer somehow irritated Sophia even more. She looked him up and down, noticing the worn briefcase, the older suit, and the grey beginning to show in his hair. "This internship is highly competitive," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Most people here graduated from top universities within the last year. I hope you can keep up." A few interns laughed quietly. Michael didn't react. He nodded, took his seat again, and opened his notebook as though nothing had happened. That only made Sophia more convinced that he lacked confidence. In her mind, people who stayed quiet usually had nothing valuable to say. Over the next several days, Sophia made sure Michael's internship was nothing like everyone else's. While the younger interns attended strategy meetings and training sessions, Michael was constantly sent on errands that had nothing to do with business. One morning, she asked him to collect coffee for 12 people from a cafe 3 blocks away. The next afternoon, she handed him 5 large boxes of old files and told him to reorganize years of paperwork in the basement archive room. Whenever there was a boring task that no one wanted, Sophia found Michael. She never yelled or lost her temper. Instead, she smiled while giving the orders, making it seem perfectly reasonable. But everyone could tell she was deliberately treating him differently. The strange part was that Michael never complained. He thanked people when they handed him work, finished every task before the deadline, and treated everyone with the same respect, from the receptionist at the front desk to the overnight cleaning staff. During lunch breaks, while the younger interns sat together discussing promotions and future salaries, Michael often chose a quiet table by himself. Instead of scrolling through social media, he read company reports and annual financial statements that most employees ignored. Several interns began wondering why someone hired as an intern seemed genuinely interested in learning how every department worked rather than trying to impress management. Sophia misunderstood his attitude completely. She believed his silence meant weakness. Each time Michael accepted another unfair assignment without arguing, she became more confident that she could push him even harder. One afternoon, she walked into the operations office carrying a thick stack of reports and dropped them onto his desk. "I need all of these reviewed before tomorrow morning," she said. Another employee quietly whispered, "That's impossible. It usually takes our whole team 2 days." Sophia heard the comment but ignored it. She looked directly at Michael and said, "If this job is too much for you, nobody's forcing you to stay." Michael simply answered, "I'll do my best." By 8 o'clock that evening, long after most employees had gone home, the reports were finished and neatly organized on Sophia's desk. The following morning, she searched every page, expecting to find mistakes. Instead, she found something unexpected. Michael hadn't only completed the reports, he had corrected several accounting errors that had gone unnoticed for months. At first, she assumed he had guessed correctly, but after checking the numbers herself, she realized every correction was accurate. Rather than thanking him, she quietly removed his notes before anyone else could see them. She wasn't ready to admit that an intern had spotted problems her own department had missed. As the weeks passed, more small moments like this began happening. A software issue delayed an important shipment schedule, and while the IT team searched for the cause, Michael casually pointed out that one data file had been imported twice. He was right. During another meeting, 2 department managers argued for nearly an hour over declining sales in one region. Michael quietly mentioned that customer complaints had increased after delivery routes changed 6 months earlier. When someone checked the records, he was right again. Yet every time he offered a useful observation, Sophia quickly changed the subject or acted as though someone else deserved the credit. Not everyone failed to notice. David Reynolds, a senior finance manager who had worked at Lawson Global for nearly 25 years, began paying close attention. David had seen talented people come and go, and something about Michael didn't fit the picture of an ordinary intern. He noticed that Michael understood financial reports without needing explanations, recognized industry trends from memory, and asked thoughtful questions that even experienced managers rarely considered. One evening, David walked past Michael's desk after everyone else had left and found him studying a company expansion plan from 5 years earlier. "Most interns don't read documents like that," David said with a smile. Michael looked up and replied, "Sometimes the answers to today's problems are hidden in yesterday's decisions." David paused for a second. That wasn't the kind of sentence an inexperienced intern would normally say. Outside the office, Michael's routine never changed. He left work every evening, picked Emma up from his neighbor's house, helped her finish her homework, cooked dinner, and listened as she talked about school. Emma often asked if he liked his new job. Michael always smiled and told her, "I'm learning something new every day." He never mentioned the insults, the extra work, or the humiliation. He wanted his daughter to believe that dignity wasn't measured by how others treated you, but by how you chose to respond. Late one Friday evening, after nearly everyone had gone home, Michael was locking his desk when his phone vibrated. The screen displayed only one word, "Chairman." He glanced around to make sure no one was nearby before quietly answering the call. His voice immediately became respectful. "Good evening, sir." The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. Michael listened carefully, answered with only a few words, and finally said, "I understand. I'll continue exactly as planned." As he slipped the phone back into his pocket, he didn't notice someone standing at the far end of the hallway. Hidden behind the glass doors, Sophia had seen everything. She couldn't hear the conversation, but one question immediately filled her mind. Why would an ordinary intern be receiving private phone calls from the chairman of Lawson Global? Sophia couldn't stop thinking about the phone call she had witnessed the previous evening. She hadn't heard a single word, but she clearly saw the name displayed on Michael's screen before he answered. It simply read Chairman. At first, she convinced herself it had to be a joke or perhaps a contact saved under a strange nickname. Still, the image stayed in her mind all weekend. By Monday morning, curiosity had turned into suspicion. Instead of asking Michael directly, she quietly instructed the IT department to review his employee records, expecting to find something unusual. The report came back an hour later, and it only confused her more. Michael's file contained almost no personal history beyond the information required for a temporary intern. There were no previous employers listed, no social media accounts connected to his profile, and no references that could explain his experience. It was as if someone had intentionally erased every trace of his professional life before he joined Lawson Global. While Sophia searched for answers, Michael continued working exactly as before. He greeted everyone with the same calm smile and never acted differently despite the constant pressure around him. One afternoon, an unexpected problem hit the company's logistics division. A supplier unexpectedly cancelled a major shipment, threatening to delay an important product launch. Department heads rushed into emergency meetings, arguing over expensive backup plans that would still leave customers waiting for weeks. Michael happened to be delivering documents to the conference room when he quietly noticed a large shipping map displayed on the screen. Before leaving, he politely said, "If I may, there might be another option." The room fell silent. Sophia rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed that an intern had interrupted senior management, but one of the directors nodded, giving Michael permission to continue. Michael walked to the screen and calmly explained how the company could reroute inventory from 2 regional warehouses that had excess stock sitting unused. He also suggested using an existing transportation contract that another division had negotiated months earlier. The solution would save millions of dollars and keep deliveries on schedule without canceling a single customer order. When the finance team quickly checked the numbers, every calculation was correct. The directors looked at one another in surprise. One executive quietly whispered, "How does an intern know about agreements that only senior leadership can access?" Before anyone could ask another question, Michael simply thanked them and returned to his desk as though nothing unusual had happened. That afternoon, David Reynolds became even more curious. He invited Michael to lunch at a nearby cafe, hoping to learn more about him. During their conversation, David asked where Michael had learned so much about business operations. Michael smiled and answered carefully, "Life has a way of teaching lessons that no university ever could." David laughed at first, but then noticed something unusual. Michael wasn't avoiding the question because he was hiding ignorance. He was choosing his words with someone who had spent years making important decisions. Every answer reflected experience, discipline, and patience rather than theory. David left the cafe convinced that Michael was far more than an ordinary intern. Meanwhile, across town, inside a quiet office on the top floor of a private building, Lawson Global's founder, Richard Lawson, sat reading daily reports prepared specifically for him. Although he had stepped away from running the company, he still monitored everything happening inside its walls. One report described how Michael had handled another week of unfair treatment without a single complaint. Richard slowly smiled before placing the file on his desk. Sitting across from him was the company's legal advisor, who asked, "Are you sure we shouldn't step in now?" Richard gently shook his head. "Not yet," he replied. "Anyone can appear humble when they have power. I need to know who remains humble when everyone believes they have none." Back at headquarters, Sophia's frustration continued to grow. Every attempt to expose Michael only seemed to prove how capable he really was. Employees had started asking for his advice, and even experienced managers listened when he spoke. She feared she was slowly losing the authority she had worked years to build. Determined to uncover the truth, she made a decision that would change everything. She used her executive access to request confidential records connected to the chairman's office, hoping to discover why Michael seemed connected to the highest level of the company. She had no idea that opening those files would trigger an automatic security alert, and by the next morning, the chairman himself would know exactly who had been trying to uncover a secret that was never meant to be found. The following morning, the atmosphere inside Lawson Global felt completely different. Employees who normally chatted over coffee were unusually quiet as urgent emails began appearing on every manager's screen. An emergency meeting had been called by the board of directors. Overnight, the company's largest international client had suspended a multi-million-dollar contract after discovering serious problems in the rollout of a new distribution system. If the issue wasn't resolved within 48 hours, the client planned to move its business to a competitor. News spread through the building at lightning speed. People whispered in hallways, department heads rushed from office to office, and phones rang non-stop. Everyone understood that losing this contract would damage the company's reputation for years. Inside the executive conference room, tension filled every seat. Charts showing falling projections covered the large display screens while senior managers argued over what had gone wrong. Some blamed the logistics department, others pointed fingers at finance or technology. No one wanted to accept responsibility. Sophia Bennett sat near the center of the table, trying to defend her department while quietly shifting attention toward everyone else. As the discussion became more heated, she suddenly remembered that Michael had been reviewing operational reports for weeks. An idea crossed her mind. If things continued getting worse, perhaps she could make him the perfect scapegoat. When the meeting paused, Sophia stood confidently and addressed the board. "There's something you should know," she said. "One of our interns has been accessing reports from multiple departments. He inserted himself into discussions he wasn't invited to and offered recommendations on projects far beyond his responsibilities. If confidential information was mishandled, we shouldn't ignore that possibility." Several executives looked surprised. A few immediately began asking who she was talking about. "His name is Michael Carter," Sophia answered without hesitation. "I believe his actions deserve immediate investigation." Just as the room began discussing Michael, the conference room doors opened. The corporate secretary quietly announced, "Mr. Carter has been asked to attend this meeting." Every eye turned toward the entrance as Michael walked inside carrying nothing except a thin notebook. Unlike everyone else, he looked completely calm. Sophia folded her arms, convinced that this would finally be the moment he was exposed. One board member looked at Michael and asked, "You've been studying reports from several departments. Is that true?" Michael nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir." Another executive quickly followed. "Do you know why this contract is falling apart?" Michael answered honestly. "Yes." The room fell silent. Sophia smiled, believing she had trapped him. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain why we're facing one of the biggest crises in company history." Michael remained composed. "With your permission, I'd rather explain how to fix it." Several executives exchanged puzzled looks. The chairman's personal secretary, who had been standing quietly near the back of the room, simply nodded. A projector was switched on, and Michael walked to the front without showing the slightest sign of nervousness. He didn't blame anyone. He didn't criticize departments. Instead, he calmly explained that the client wasn't leaving because of one mistake. The real problem was that several divisions had stopped communicating with each other months earlier. Inventory updates, shipping schedules, and customer support records were all operating on separate systems, creating delays that no single department could see. Then he presented a practical recovery plan that could be implemented immediately by combining existing resources rather than spending millions on emergency solutions. As Michael spoke, the room grew quieter with every slide. Executives who had spent hours arguing now found themselves taking notes. The finance director verified the projected costs and slowly nodded. The operations chief checked the logistics timeline and confirmed that Michael's proposal could actually work. Even the company's legal advisor admitted the revised plan would satisfy the client's contractual requirements. Within 30 minutes, the atmosphere inside the room had completely changed. Panic had been replaced by cautious optimism. Sophia's confidence disappeared. She stared at the presentation in disbelief, unable to understand how an intern had solved a problem that experienced executives couldn't. She searched for a flaw in his proposal but couldn't find one. For the first time since Michael had joined the company, she had no words. Just then, the conference room doors opened once again. Every person in the room immediately stood as 80-year-old founder Richard Lawson slowly walked inside with the support of a cane. He rarely appeared at headquarters anymore, making his unexpected arrival even more significant. Richard looked around the room before turning his attention to Michael, who quietly stepped back from the screen. The founder smiled, then faced the board. "I've heard enough," he said calmly. "It's time everyone in this room learns why Michael Carter was never just an intern." The room became completely silent. No one moved. No one even looked away from Richard Lawson as he slowly walked to the head of the table and rested both hands on his cane. His eyes settled on Michael for a long moment before he spoke. "For months, many of you believed this man was an ordinary intern," he said calmly. "The truth is that Michael Carter is the person I chose to lead Lawson Global after me." A wave of shock swept across the room. Several executives stared at Michael as if they were seeing him for the first time, while Sophia's face lost all color. Richard continued, explaining that years earlier he had made a promise to Michael's late father, a trusted friend who helped build the company from the ground up. When the time came to choose a successor, Michael refused a senior title. He insisted on entering the company at the lowest level so he could learn every department and see how employees were truly treated when no one thought they mattered. Richard then turned toward the board. "A leader is not the person who demands respect," he said. "A leader is the person who shows respect when he has every reason not to." The room remained silent as the meaning of those words settled over everyone. Sophia finally stood and offered a trembling apology, admitting she had judged Michael by his age, his clothes, and his title instead of his character. Michael accepted the apology without anger. He thanked the employees who had treated him kindly and made one promise before the meeting ended. Promotions at Lawson Global would no longer depend on appearances or connections, but on integrity, competence, and the way people treated others. As the executives rose to shake his hand, Michael glanced out the window toward the city below, knowing the hardest part of leadership was not gaining power, it was using it wisely. You never know who is quietly preparing for greatness. Respect should never depend on someone's title, salary, or appearance, because true leaders don't need recognition to prove their worth.